Oh, excuse me. Was that? Thank you. Thank you and good morning. I now call the June 2013 open meeting of the Federal Communications Commission to order. Before we proceed with today's agenda, as a point of personal privilege, I'd like to begin with some very brief comments. It's been almost 6 weeks since I was sworn in as acting chair, and I wanted to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has eased this transition for me and the agency. First, to the professional staff at the Commission. Just when I thought that there was no way you could perform any better, you, of course, went even further. Your enthusiasm and support during this transition has been amazing and humbling. I cannot thank you enough for what you have done for me personally, but more importantly, what you do for the American people each and every day. Second, to my personal staff. I was really worried that you guys worked too hard even before this new phase, but you have shown, and I am not surprised at all, that you have what it takes to tackle any challenge. I am so incredibly deeply moved that my family is represented today by my congressman, my father, Assistant Democratic Leader James Clyburn, and his brother John. I'll try not to embarrass you with the tears, but thank you so very much for your presence and unconditional support, and of course, love. I am proud to say that I am your daughter, one of your closest friends, and a very, very grateful constituent. Thank you, of course, to Commissioners Rosenworcel and Pai. You've really gone above and beyond by way of support, which ensures that the work of this commission gets done and gets done right. So thank you so very much. And with that, Madam Secretary, I think. With that, Madam Secretary, would you please introduce our agenda for this morning?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you.
Good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. Today's agenda includes 3 items for your consideration and 2 presentations. First, you will consider a report in order to improve and streamline the collection of broadband subscription and deployment data. Second, you will consider a report in order with licensing, service, and technical rules in the H block at 1915 to 1920 and 1995 to 2000 megahertz that would help increase the nation's supply of spectrum for flexible use services, including mobile broadband. Third, you will consider a declaratory ruling clarifying the wireless carriers that collect or direct the collection of customer proprietary network information, or CP&I, on mobile devices must adhere to statutory and regulatory CP&I requirements in protecting that information. You will also hear an update on the status of Universal Service Reform implementation and an update on the status of the Broadcast Incentive Auction. This is your agenda for today. The first item will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Lisa Gelb, Deputy Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ms. Gelb, thank you and welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. We are pleased to present for your consideration an item to improve and streamline the Commission's collection of broadband and voice data. Since 2000, the Commission has collected data about subscribership to telephone and broadband services through the FCC's Form 477. Recognizing that good policies necessitate good data, the item before you would make several changes to the Form 477 to begin collecting broadband deployment data, improve data quality, and reduce filing burdens. These reforms, which would be implemented in the coming year, will provide the Commission with essential data about fixed and mobile broadband to inform our policy-making activities while reducing the overall burden on providers. I would like to acknowledge and thank the Wireline Competition Bureau team whose diligent efforts produced the item we present today. Carol Simpson, Deputy Chief in the Bureau's Competition Policy Division, and Chelsea Fallon, Assistant Chief in the Bureau's Industry Analysis and Technology Division, who are at the table with me, as well as Julie Veach, Steve Rosenberg, Kirk Berge, Roger Wook, Bill Dever, Jean Ann Collins, Melissa Kirkle, Ken Lynch, and Ellen Burton. We also appreciate the input of our colleagues in the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, the International Bureau, the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, and the Office of General Counsel. From the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, I especially thank Jim Schlichting, Deputy Chief, who is seated here with me today, as well as Ruth Milkman, Neisha Gendelsberger, and Susan Singer for their assistance on this item. Chelsea Fallon will present the item.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Data on broadband and voice services have proved essential to meeting the Commission's statutory and policy goals, including promoting universal service and assessing competition. These data also play a vital public interest role in their extensive use by state, local, and other federal government agencies, as well as many others. The draft report and order before you takes several important steps toward improving the Commission's Form 477 data collection. First, the order assumes the collection of data on broadband deployment initiated by NTIA in partnership with the states. As NTIA's funding for its collection program is scheduled to expire in 2014, the Commission would collect the data so that they are available for policymaking, for research, and for populating the national broadband map. Beginning in the second half of 2014, the Commission would collect broadband deployment data using the same mechanism it currently uses to collect broadband and voice subscription data, the semi-annual Form 477 filing. Fixed broadband providers would file deployment data by census block, while mobile providers would submit digital representations showing their network coverage boundaries. While the Form 477 collection of deployment data would be similar to the NTIA collection, the order makes some modifications designed to improve the data collection and reduce filers' burdens. First, the Form 477 collection allows providers to submit their data in a single uniform format rather than to multiple state entities in varying formats. This will reduce their filing burden and improve data quality. Second, the order eliminates the obligation to submit broadband deployment data in predetermined speed tiers. Instead, fixed providers will simply report the maximum upload and download speeds they offer in each census block, while mobile broadband providers will report the minimum advertised speeds associated with each coverage area. Third, the order directs fixed broadband providers to distinguish, where appropriate, their deployment of residential from non-residential services. Finally, the order initiates the collection of mobile voice deployment data by requiring facilities-based mobile voice providers to submit digital representations showing their voice network coverage boundaries. Beyond initiating the collection of deployment data, the order adopts several changes to the current Form 477 collection of subscribership data. These changes include the elimination of duplicative questions on service availability, the elimination of the use of speed tiers for reporting broadband subscription data, and the collection of fixed voice and interconnected VoIP subscribership data by census tract. Instead of reporting broadband subscription by speed tier, filers would report the number of broadband connections by the advertised speeds associated with each product subscribed to in an area, census tracts for fixed and states for mobile. Finally, the order initiates the collection of emergency contact information from filers and requires the reporting of company identification information for the purpose of cross-referencing Form 477 with other data collections. while the order declines to collect subscribership data at a more granular level at this time, it does direct the Wireline Competition Bureau, in consultation with the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, to develop and test technical improvements to the Form 477 data collection mechanism. The goals of these technical improvements are to reduce filing burden and to facilitate the collection of subscribership data at a smaller geography. This approach gives the Commission flexibility to determine, at a later date, if collecting subscribership data at a different level of granularity would be appropriate. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fallon. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
Well, I have to start by saying there are definitely fewer of us up here.
You notice?
But by my count, there are more women than men. We might be taken over.
Thank you. That deserves it. Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
All in favor?
I like it. We cannot manage what we do not measure. The person who taught me this was the late Senator Inouye. I had the privilege of working for him when he introduced the Broadband Data Improvement Act. A copy of this law, which was later incorporated into the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, hangs on my office wall, complete with his signature. The point of his truism is simple, but the reality is profound. If we want to tackle our nation's challenges, we need good data to drive our policies. To this end, the Broadband Data Improvement Act helped usher in a new era of more data-centric broadband policy. It led to a grant program at the NTIA that in turn led to a national broadband map. We can and should improve on the information in this map. But without the basic data it provides, we would never have been able to pursue major policy goals, like the reform of our universal service system to support broadband deployment. As the NTIA's grant program nears completion, it is time to ensure what we have built becomes a foundation for good policy going forward. It is time for the FCC to take up NTIA's broadband data collection efforts and continue to improve upon them. For these reasons, I am pleased to support today's report and order. Although limited in scope, it puts us on the path of securing continuity of the national broadband map by updating our Form 477 to collect network deployment data for fixed and mobile broadband. It also takes measures to improve the quality of our broadband and voice subscription data while reducing burdens on providers. Now, going forward, I hope we will continue to consider further improvements to our data collection efforts. Some of these have been teed up in our record, including the collection of pricing data, which I acknowledge can be sensitive and complicated. Yet studies consistently demonstrate that roughly 1/3 of Americans choose not to subscribe to broadband, citing lack of relevance, lack of digital literacy, and lack of affordability. How can our policies ensure that Americans do not end up on the wrong side of the digital divide without a better understanding of cost and affordability? Again, we cannot manage what we do not measure. We cannot fix what we do not understand. So I look forward to further discussion on these issues. Because with better broadband data, we can have better broadband policy.
Thank you. Commissioner Pai?
Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I have a few comments about Form 477 that I'll get to in due course, but I would like to note as well the historic nature of our proceeding this morning. Our agency recently had a birthday. We turned 79 years old, and in that time, we have had 30 chairs. Thus far, they have been chairmen. Obviously, today is a break from the norm. And overall, I think it is safe to say that this is probably the most diverse the FCC has ever been in terms of the Commission. maybe the Senate will act soon to provide some new diversity to the panel. But I want to note that I am proud of having you as a colleague and getting to know you as a friend. I appreciate your reaching out to me, your staff reaching out to ours, and forging a consensus on all of these different issues. It's a challenging role, but one that I think the agency is fortunate to have you at its helm. In fact, I also had a quick note to Congressman Clyburn. There's so many things that you have to be proud of in your life, but I'm quite confident when I say that I'm sure that among the most proudest accomplishments you have is the fact that you have a daughter as talented as the chairwoman leading the helm. And as a father, I can only imagine the pride that you must feel being here this morning. So thank you for coming. And now to Form 477. How's that for a segue? It's fair to say that the FCC collects a lot of data and issues a lot of reports. According to the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, for example, the Commission collects information in 424 distinct ways from members of the American public. We release a plethora of reports on different aspects of the communications marketplace, some each year as mandated by Congress, and others more intermittently. Today we start consolidating some of these disparate collections that underlie those reports. And we do so in a way that, we hope, reduces the burden on telephone and broadband service providers, while at the same time providing the information that Congress and the Commission need to make well-informed decisions. I'm pleased that my colleagues accepted several of my suggestions to streamline this collection. For instance, we make clear that multi-state providers only need to file once to report their multi-state services, rather than filing a separate form for each state's data. We also direct the bureaus to develop software to reduce the cost of filing for those providers that volunteer to use it. More generally, I appreciate Chairwoman Clyburn for crafting a consensus, deferring contentious issues like the collection of broadband pricing information for another day. That takes care of input. Well, what about output, namely the reports that we release? Well, we will rely on the data that we collect here for 5 separate reports. The Broadband Deployment Report, the Internet Access Services Report, the Local Telephone Competition Report, the Wireless Competition Report, and the International Broadband Data Report. Now, I'd like to consolidate all of these reports, but our congressional reporting requirements stem from a simpler time, when each silo of the communications industry was an easily defined marketplace unto itself. And that's why I support efforts in Congress to pass the Federal Communications Commission Consolidated Reporting Act. This legislation would give the FCC the freedom to extend the reforms that we adopt today, eliminating outdated obligations and refining our work in a way that makes sense for us, for Congress, and ultimately for consumers. Finally, this order has been 2 years in the making, and so I would be remiss if I didn't thank, in alphabetical order, Kirk Berge, Ellen Burton, Jeanne Collins, Bill Deaver, Lisa Gelb, Chelsea Fallon, Neshe Gundelsberger, Diane Griffin Holland, Michael Jansen, Melissa Kirkle, Doug Klein, Travis Littman, Ken Lynch, Marcus Mayer, Ruth Milkman, Steve Rosenberg, Paroma Sanyal, Jim Schlichting, Mithali Shah, Carol Simpson, Susan Singer, Jamie Suskind, Julie Veach, and, last but not least, Roger Wook for their contributions. Now is an appropriate time to recognize all of these analysts, economists, number crunchers, and data wizards of the Industry Analysis and Technology Division. You turn the vast oceans of information that we collect into products that are useful for policymakers here and on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue. And we are often grateful, we are grateful for what is often an unsung task. So thank you for all of your efforts. And thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Commissioner Fine. While this item may not be flashy, it is critical to our agency's effectiveness and core mission. The Commission must have complete, accurate, and reliable data to fulfill our statutory duties of promoting universal service, public safety, a competitive communications marketplace, and the reasonable and timely deployment of broadband networks. I am pleased that my colleagues join me today to improve and streamline our collection of data about broadband and voice services. The changes we make today will ensure that the Commission, other government agencies, and the public will continue to have access to the National Broadband Map. This publicly available tool, which shows the availability of fixed and mobile broadband throughout America, has become a critical resource for our nation. The FCC has used the National Broadband Map to determine unserved areas for universal service purposes, among other key policy initiatives. NTIA, in partnership with the states, has been collecting and populating the National Broadband Map for the last 3 years, and I thank and applaud them for their tireless work in doing so. This item will allow the FCC to build upon NTIA's fantastic work while taking steps to reduce burdens on providers. We must remain mindful of the cost that the collection of data for policymaking purposes may impose on industry and ultimately on consumers and ratepayers. The steps taken in the report and order address this concern by reducing reporting burdens while improving the quality of data collected on Form 477. For example, the item institutes a single uniform filing format, as we've heard, and eliminates the requirement that providers place their subscribers in various government-defined speed tiers, and instead has providers report their self-selected advertising speeds. These changes will reduce the amount of time and effort needed to provide us this information and increase the Commission's flexibility in analyzing the data. While this report and order does not collect pricing information or more granular subscription data as some parties have requested, it leaves the door open to do so. The order initiates a voluntary program for providers to help test a client-side application that will evaluate ways to collect more granular data in a manner that minimizes burdens on respondents. These technical improvements are an important step to enable the Commission to collect additional data in the future. Finally, I am pleased that this item takes steps to explore making the subscription data collected on the Form 477 available to the public, including researchers. Such information is a valuable resource for local and state governments, academics, as well as members of the general public. I encourage the Wireline Competition Bureau, in consultation with the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, to explore ways to facilitate greater public access to the subscription data collected on Form 477 while still protecting competitively sensitive data. I wish to thank my fellow commissioners, the staff of the Wireline Competition Bureau and the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, as enumerated by my colleague, for your tireless work on this item. Again, I thank you. And unless there's any further discussion, we will proceed to a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it, so ordered. The request for editorial privileges is granted. And Madam Secretary, please announce our next item. Thank you very much.
Madam Chairwoman, Commissioners, the next item on your agenda will be presented by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. It is entitled Service Rules for Advanced Wireless Services, H-Block, Implementation of Section 6401 of the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012 related to the 1950 to 1920 megahertz and 1995 to 2000 megahertz bands.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Good morning. Ms. Milkman. I'm renaming you. But you'll accept that, right? Editorial privileges and all? Okay.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. It's my pleasure to introduce this draft report and order to adopt licensing, service, and technical rules for the H-Block. This draft report and order represents a significant step toward enabling the use of up to 10 megahertz of spectrum for flexible use services, including mobile broadband. It is also a step towards meeting our obligation under the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012 to license 65 megahertz of spectrum by February 2015. The staff is working towards holding an H-Block auction in late 2013 or early 2014. The draft report and order is the product of significant work by staff of the Wireless Bureau as well as the Office of Engineering and Technology. Thank you to the talented attorneys and highly skilled engineers who worked on this item, with a special thanks to Kevin Holmes, Janet Young, and Michael Ha, as well as the Auctions Division. I'm joined at the table by John Leibovitz. Good, you are there. Deputy Chief of the Wireless Bureau, Jeremy Marcus, Associate Chief of the Broadband Division of Wireless, and Matt Pearl, an attorney in the Broadband Division. Matt is one of the honors attorneys who started in the fall of 2012, and this is his first presentation to the Commission. Matt will present the item.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. I am pleased to present to you the H-Block report and order. The item before you today would increase the nation's supply of spectrum for flexible use services, including mobile broadband. Specifically, the item would adopt rules to auction and license 10 megahertz of paired spectrum at 1915 to 1920 megahertz and 1995 to 2000 megahertz. This spectrum is referred to as the H-Block because it is directly adjacent to the broadband PCS A through G blocks and may serve as a PCS extension band. Today's report and order would implement the congressional directive in the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012, or Spectrum Act, that the Commission grant new initial licenses for these spectrum bands through a system of competitive bidding by February 2015. Specifically, the report and order would adopt terrestrial service, technical, and licensing rules that generally follow the Commission's Part 27 flexible use rules, modified as necessary to account for issues unique to the H-Block bands. To begin with, the report and order would establish that the H-Block meets all the statutory requirements of the Spectrum Act. Specifically, the report and order would find that the Commission's prior action to allocate the H-Block for fixed and mobile use satisfies the Act's requirement that the H-Block be allocated for commercial use. The item would also adopt flexible use service rules, as well as rules necessary to assign the H-Block licenses through a system of competitive bidding. Finally, the item would determine that, subject to appropriate technical rules, the H-Block spectrum can be used without causing harmful interference to PCS operations in the 1930 to 1995 megahertz band. As noted, the report and order would adopt service rules for the H-Block. Specifically, the item would adopt a band plan that pairs mobile uplink spectrum in 1915 to 1920 megahertz with downlink operations in 1995 to 2000 megahertz, and a geographic area licensing scheme to license the H-Block on an economic area basis. Based on significant analysis of technical studies submitted in the record of this proceeding, the item would establish technical rules, including power and emissions limits, that will maximize the full flexible use of the H-Block spectrum and protect against harmful interference to adjacent PCS operations and other nearby spectrum bands. The item would also adopt a variety of other service, licensing, and operating rules that address issues such as relocation cost sharing, secondary markets, performance requirements, and renewal criteria. The Wireless Telecommunications Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Well done, Mr. Pearl. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
We are on the cusp of a small but mighty tale of spectrum success. The possibilities for the 1915 to 1920 megahertz and 1995 to 2000 megahertz spectrum bands, known as the PCS H-Block, have long been undermined by interference concerns. But we are now poised to finally bring this 10 megahertz of prize spectrum to market. The H Block has quite a history. It features more than a few fits and starts. The lower portion of the H Block started life as part of the unlicensed PCS band back when the rest of the PCS spectrum was auctioned in 1994. To put this in context, think back to your first wireless phone. The odds are it probably operated on PCS spectrum. 10 years after the first PCS auction, the Commission turned to the H Block and sought to auction it too. But the interference potential was too great, and the time was not right. 4 years later, the Commission again tried to tee up the H Block for auction. Yet once more, efforts to limit interference hindered efforts to auction this spectrum. Another 4 years down the road, Congress passed the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act. In it, Congress identified 65 megahertz of spectrum for auction, including the H Block. Moreover, Congress directed that the revenue from this spectrum serve as a down payment toward a nationwide interoperable public safety broadband network, known as the First Responder Network Authority. In fact, the H Block is unique among the 65 megahertz identified by Congress. It is the only specifically identified spectrum in the law that is paired and not already in use by federal agencies. That distinction is critical. It means that revenue from the H Block will not be burdened by having to pay up front for the relocation of federal users. That means that the H Block is our best chance to provide significant funding for our first responders before we get started on another kind of auction, incentive auctions. So, after an act of Congress, leaps forward in technology, and hard work by the Commission staff to resolve long-standing interference concerns, we can finally auction the H Block for commercial use. The only question is when. In the end, I hope our timing is guided by good spectrum policy and considers how we increase demand for this slice of our airwaves. After all, support for our nation's first responders depends on it. Thank you to the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau for your efforts, and I am pleased to support this report in order.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pye?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. A lot has changed since the Commission last auctioned spectrum for mobile broadband. Back in 2008, the first Twilight movie was just hitting the theaters. Today, thankfully, we're done with them all. Just to be clear for the press, I'm not on Team Edward or on Team Jacob. Back in 2008, LeBron James was a hero in Cleveland. Now, not so much, according to my in-laws from Northeast Ohio anyway. And 5 years ago, the word tablet conjured up images of vitamins and the 10 Commandments. But now we think of the iPad and the Samsung Galaxy Tab. It's that last change, inspired primarily by consumers' insatiable demand for mobile data, that has intensified the need to push additional spectrum into the commercial marketplace. And that means that we are long past due for another auction. And with this order, we're on track to have one in the very near future, an auction of the 10 megahertz H Block. This was no easy task. This long fallow spectrum has been burdened by unresolved reimbursement issues and a seemingly intractable interference risk to nearby licensees. But last year, in the Spectrum Act, Congress identified the 2 megahertz bands comprising the H Block as invaluable for mobile broadband. By breaking the logjam, Congress enabled the Commission to redouble its efforts. And working together with experts in the private sector, our dedicated staff was able to determine that changed circumstances and new technology had opened up a workable way forward. So today, we take several steps to ensure that the auction to come will yield maximum revenue and that the H Block spectrum is put to its highest valued use. Most importantly, I'm pleased that we do not saddle this spectrum with burdensome and unnecessary conditions. Instead, we simply outline straightforward and flexible rules for H Block licensees. I'm confident that this common sense approach will make for a successful auction of this paired spectrum in the coming months. and I believe that this approach should serve as a model for future auctions. I'd like to thank Ruth Milkman, Chief of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, John Leibovitz, Jeremy Marcus, Blaise Cinto, Kevin Holmes, Janet Young, Michael Ha, Matt Pearl for presenting, Tom Peters, Brian Regan, and Renee Gregory for their hard work on this order. I stand ready to do anything I can to help make our goal of holding the H-Block auction in late 2013 or early 2014 a reality. The sooner we do so, the better, both for interested bidders and the consumers who increasingly expect mobile broadband wherever they go. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Commissioner. The mobile revolution shows no sign of stalling. In fact, by all accounts, it continues to gain incredible momentum. 15% of all global internet traffic is mobile, up from just 1% when I arrived at the Commission just under 4 years ago. In 2009, about 16% of Americans had smartphones. That number had risen to 56% by 2012, and we have every reason to believe that this trend continues upward. I've said it many times, but it still amazes me that the commercial tablet market didn't even exist in 2009, but a projected 229 million tablets will be shipped this year, surpassing the sales for portable PCs. That's amazing to me. These trends affirm how clear and important our job really is. The Commission must continue to ensure that the nation's wireless networks have the capacity, speed, ubiquity to keep pace with consumers' expectations and their ever-rising demand for mobile services. That is why the National Broadband Plan set an ambitious goal of freeing up 300 megahertz of spectrum for broadband by 2015 through the use of a variety of traditional strategies and new policy innovations like incentive auctions, spectrum sharing, and next-generation unlicensed use, and I am pleased to confirm that the Commission is on track to exceed this target. The adoption of these rules today is a continuation of our important work toward that goal. We are releasing 10 megahertz of paired spectrum. That makes up the H-Block for flexible use, including mobile broadband service. Specifically, we are adopting licensing, technical, and service rules for the H-Block that will allow the full 10 megahertz to be used for mobile broadband service while providing adequate protection to the neighboring bands. Importantly, the item adopts technical rules to help ensure that H-Block's operations do not cause harmful interference to the PCS downlink spectrum, just as Congress directed. This is no small feat. The FCC, led by our world-class engineers, has been working on a sensible approach to the use of this spectrum since 2004. I, for one, am pleased that advances in wireless broadband technology have allowed us to craft rules for the efficient use of the H-Block, finally allowing us to release this spectrum into the marketplace. With this item, the Commission takes another critical step towards implementing the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012's directive to license 65 megahertz of spectrum for flexible use by February of 2015. It is also consistent with the President's encouragement to expedite the repurposing of spectrum and otherwise enable innovative and flexible commercial uses of spectrum, including broadband, to be deployed as rapidly as possible. I'd like to thank my colleagues for their collaboration on this item, and also, of course, the tireless staff of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau and the Office of Engineering Technology for presenting us with such a thoughtful item. And unless there's any more discussion, we will proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The ayes have it, so ordered. And the request for editorial privileges is granted. Madam Secretary, please announce our next item.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, the next item on your agenda will be presented by the Office of General Counsel. It is entitled Implementation of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, Telecommunications Carriers' Use of Customer Proprietary Network Information and Other Customer Information.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
You guys come.
Whenever you're ready, you're sort of far away, but let's.
We're on one end here.
Mr. Lett?
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Since 1996, the Commission has worked to implement Section 222 of the Communications Act, which requires carriers to protect their customers' private information and governs how and under what conditions they may use, disclose, or permit access to what is called Customer Proprietary Network Information, or CPNI. The Commission has addressed CPNI requirements several times. When it last did so in 2007, smartphones were in their infancy, and mobile carriers could argue that they lacked any control over decisions regarding what information to store or not to store on their customers' devices. Now smartphones are nearly ubiquitous. Also, it has come to light that carriers, which often control the initial configuration of their customers' devices, can and do use customers' devices to collect information that fits the definition of CPNI. Last year, OGC, along with the Wireline and Wireless Bureaus, issued a public notice that noted these changes and sought comment on the practices of mobile wireless service providers and what, if any, action the Commission should take. We now offer for your consideration a declaratory ruling that addresses the privacy and security risks that we have found may arise. OGC received valuable input from the Wireline, Wireless, Enforcement, and Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureaus, as well as from the Office of Strategic Planning, and we thank them all for their help. With me at the table are Associate General Counsel Jennifer Tatel and Douglas Klein, an attorney in OGC. Doug will present the item.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. This declaratory ruling makes clear that Section 222 of the Communications Act and the Commission's rules apply to information relating to telecommunications service that fits the statutory definition of Customer Proprietary Network Information, or CPNI, when such information is collected by the customer's device at the mobile wireless carrier's direction, and the carrier or its designee has access to or control over the information. CPNI includes the phone numbers that a customer has called and received calls from, the durations of calls, the phone's location at the beginning and end of each call, and more. Section 222 establishes the duty of every telecommunications carrier to, quote, protect the confidentiality of proprietary information of and relating to customers, unquote. And a carrier that receives or obtains CPNI by virtue of its provision of a telecommunications service may use, disclose, or permit access to individually identifiable CPNI only in limited circumstances, as the Commission has explained in prior orders. The relationship between a telecommunications carrier and its customer is one of particular sensitivity given the special position that a carrier occupies as its customer's gatekeeper to the network, and Congress recognized that special position in enacting Section 222. This is no less the case when the information is collected at the carrier's direction on a mobile device. While it is certainly true that mobile devices also can and do collect and store some information that does not pertain to a telecommunications service and is not CPNI, this item is concerned only with information that does pertain to a telecommunications service and is CPNI. Consumers should be aware that carriers are allowed to collect this data and to use it in their provision of services to improve their networks and to improve customer support. The Communications Act also does not prohibit carriers from using or disclosing de-identified or aggregated data. Carriers might collect this information for good reasons, for example, to detect a weak signal, dropped calls, or troubles with particular models of phones. But the information must be protected and must not be misused. This declaratory ruling would not adopt or propose any new rules regarding how CPNI may be used or how it must be protected. It only clarifies that the Commission's established privacy requirements apply. Carriers must take reasonable precautions to prevent the unauthorized disclosure of a customer's CPNI. The Commission can impose penalties in the event that a failure to take reasonable precautions causes a compromise of CPNI on a device. OGC recommends adoption of this declaratory ruling and requests editorial privileges.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
It has been over 6 years since the Commission last updated its customer proprietary network information rules. Think about that. Our last major decision was released before the introduction of the iPhone. Before any one of us thought it was normal to tap on a screen, any screen, and expect an internet-enabled response based on the swipe of a finger. Before streaming any video in our palms and laps was even imaginable. Before the applications economy grew to provide 500,000 new jobs. It was a long time ago. In the intervening years, several trends have collided to make the values that inform our CP&I rules both more important and more complicated. First, connection is no longer merely convenient. We live in an age of always-on connectivity. We are a nation with more wireless phones than people, and now 1 in 3 adults has a tablet computer. Our commercial and civic lives are migrating online with ferocious force and speed. Simply put, the opportunity to opt out of this new digital age is limited. Its advances are too bountiful, they save us time and money, and they inform and support all aspects of modern life. Second, it used to be that the communications relationship was primarily between a customer and his or her carrier. But the number of third parties participating in our digital age connections and transactions has multiplied exponentially. Dial a call, write an email, make a purchase, post an online update to a social network, read a news site, store your family photographs in the cloud, and you should assume that service providers, advertising networks, and companies specializing in analytics have access to your personal information. Lots of it, and for a long time. Our digital footprints are hardly in sand, they are effectively in wet cement. Third, the monetization of data is big business. The cost of data storage has declined dramatically. The market incentives to keep our data and slice and dice it to inform commercial activities are enormous. They are only going to grow. So going forward, I think the Commission needs to take note of these trends. They are the impetus, I believe, for last year's administration blueprint for consumer data privacy in the 21st century. It's a blueprint I support. But against this background, we also need to do simple things at the Commission, like enforce our rules. To this end, in Section 222 of the Communications Act, Congress sought to guard consumers by defining CP&I rights in their relationship with their telecommunications carriers. The right to know what information is being collected about them, the right to get notice when information is being used for other purposes, and the right to be able to stop the reuse or sale of that information. Today's decision advances these principles. It clarifies that our CP&I rules and obligations apply to information that carriers cause to be stored on their customers' devices, like wireless phones. As a result, carriers may only use and disclose such information consistent with our rules. This means wireless carriers must protect CP&I data from unauthorized disclosure and inform subscribers in the event of a security breach. However, it is also important to be clear about what our decision does not do. Our CP&I protections at issue in this decision involve carriers. They do not apply to the manufacturers of wireless phones. They do not apply to the developers of operating systems. So let's be honest. Consumers can be confused by these distinctions, but the scope of this proceeding and Section 222 are limited. So I hope the agency can be proactive and help consumers better understand the different ways their personal data may be collected on a mobile phone, what rules apply, and how they can protect themselves. Furthermore, I think we should take on this task with our colleagues at the Federal Trade Commission, because consumers should not have to be network engineers to understand who is collecting their data and they should not have to be lawyers to determine if their information is protected. We should strive to simplify privacy policies across all platforms and aim for more consistency. But in the interim, it is also essential that we enforce our rules. That is what we do here, and that is why I am pleased to support this declaratory ruling.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pai?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The privacy of Americans' phone records is a topic that has been in the news a little bit recently. But this morning, the Commission tackles a small piece of this subject that hasn't made the headlines. In today's declaratory ruling, we seek to clarify both when data stored on a mobile device constitutes customer proprietary network information, or CPNI, and when carriers must protect such CPNI pursuant to Section 222 of the Communications Act. I want to start by thanking my colleagues for their willingness to incorporate many of my suggestions into the item, and especially commend Chairwoman Clyburn for her leadership, which was critical in reaching today's results. I had serious concerns with the original version of this item, but over the last several days, substantial changes to the declaratory ruling have largely allayed those concerns. And in order to make my presentation a little more dramatic, I've requested some mood lighting. And now the end is near. No, I won't be singing My Way, don't worry. We had it our way in this item. Therefore, I'm voting this morning to approve in part and concur in part. 4 factors are critical to my decision. First, I agree that there is no mobile device exception to either Section 222 or our CPNI rules. If information is covered by the statutory definition of CPNI set forth in Section 222H1, then it is CPNI, regardless of whether it's located on a mobile device or not. It is what it is. Second, today's declaratory ruling is limited in scope. It only applies to information that is both, number 1, collected by or at the direction of the carrier, and, number 2, may be accessed or controlled by the carrier or its designee. Therefore, if a carrier is not responsible for the collection of certain data, then it may not be held responsible for protecting that data. Likewise, if a carrier doesn't have access to or control over information, then it is not obligated to safeguard it. Third, the Commission provides carriers with maximum flexibility in carrying out their statutory responsibilities with respect to CPNI stored on mobile devices. In today's item, we do not opine on various hypotheticals in the absence of a fully developed factual record and a concrete set of facts. Given the complex and quickly evolving technologies at issue, this restraint is wise. Fourth, and perhaps most important, this declaratory ruling does not seek to hold carriers liable for compliance with voluntary codes of conduct under Section 201B of the Communications Act. I believe the FCC should welcome the development of private sector solutions to some of the challenges facing the industry and consumers. Imbuing such codes of conduct with the force of law, however, would have precisely the opposite effect. Now, carriers, needless to say, would be worse off if we changed the meaning of voluntary in voluntary codes of conduct. But consumers, ultimately, would be worse off too. If no good deed goes unpunished, the industry will be less likely to take joint, consumer-friendly action of its own accord. Now, to be sure, I don't agree with every single legal theory set forth in today's item, and that's why I'm concurring in part. Specifically, I do not join the item's discussion of Section 222C1, and in particular, its claim that the provision makes a carrier responsible for CPNI that it has neither received nor obtained. On the whole, however, I believe that today's declaratory ruling arrives at a reasonable result, one that is fair to consumers and to carriers alike. Finally, I would like to thank Sean Lev, Jennifer Tatel, Doug Klein of the Office of General Counsel, my former home, as well as Michelle Elson, Dave Grimaldi, and Louis Peretz in the Office of Chairwoman Clyburn for their hard work on this item, including the fruitful discussions that led to this happy outcome. This item might not receive the same media attention as other privacy issues in the press, but you deserve public recognition nonetheless for your valiant efforts on today's order. Thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. I knew you were a powerful person, but just to be able to take away the light, oh my gosh, I have to be careful in my next series of interactions with you, I suppose. Consumer privacy protection is a key component of the Commission's mission to serve the public interest. Changes in technology and market practices have raised many new concerns when it comes to privacy, but today's action affirms the Commission's commitment to the protection of wireless consumers by updating the FCC's Consumer Proprietary Network Information, or CPNI, policies. Examples of CPNI include those numbers called, the times of those calls, and the locations from which a customer makes those calls. Consumers rightfully expect that this information will be safeguarded, whether it's retained on their mobile device or in a carrier's back office systems. That is why this declaratory ruling clarifies that a carrier has received or obtained CPNI when the carrier causes that information to be obtained or directs a third party to obtain that information and store it on a consumer's mobile device. Carriers should be responsible for safeguarding the customer information that they collect wherever it's stored. Today's decision ensures that it will be. We do not require carriers to implement any particular type of protection, as you've heard. Instead, we allow them to choose their own method of safeguarding CPNI as long as it provides appropriate protection against unauthorized access. I do want to make clear, however, that if a carrier fails to protect CPNI, this Commission stands ready to use its enforcement authority, including its authority to order forfeitures. It is also worth noting what this declaratory ruling does not do. You heard my colleague say that it does not affect third-party app developers or apps that customers might install from an app store. It does not prohibit carriers from collecting information needed to improve networks. In fact, we recognize the benefits of such data collection. However, while there can be benefits to carrier data collection using customers' devices, the fact that such sensitive information is stored on each subscriber's mobile device emphasizes the need to ensure such information is protected. In sum, today's declaratory ruling demonstrates that while technology and consumer behavior evolve, we will continue to exercise our statutory authority to protect consumers. I would like to thank once again my colleagues for their support on this item, as well as the tireless efforts of Sean Lev, Jennifer Tato, Douglas Klein, and the other members of the Office of General Counsel for presenting us with such an important item. And unless there is any more discussion, we will proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
A concurrent part.
So the ayes have it so ordered. The request for editorial privilege is granted. And Madam Secretary, please announce our first presentation for the morning.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, next, the Wireline Competition Bureau, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, and the Office of Native Affairs and Policy will present an update on Universal Service Reform implementation.
Good morning.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. On behalf of the Wireline Competition Bureau, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, and the Office of Native Affairs and Policy, we are very pleased to present a status report on the implementation of universal service reforms. Ruth Milkman joins me today at the table while Jeff Blackwell is traveling. This truly has been a cross-bureau and office effort with dedicated teams working in collaboration. working hard on these important reforms. There are far, far too many people to name and thank, but on behalf of the bureaus in office, I want to say I thank all of them. And now I'll turn it over to the team to present the report. Amy Bender from the Wireline Competition Bureau, Margie Weiner from the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, and Irene Flannery from the Office of Native Affairs and Policy will present the report.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. We are here today to highlight our activities to implement the Connect America Fund. Today, most of the 15 million Americans who are unserved by fixed broadband live in areas served by a price cap carrier. The implementation of the Connect America Fund for price cap areas is being performed in 2 phases. Phase 1 provides one-time, additional, incremental support to deploy broadband-capable infrastructure to unserved areas. In July 2012, price cap carriers accepted nearly $115 million of Connect America Phase 1 funding to deploy broadband-capable infrastructure to nearly 400,000 Americans who did not previously have access to broadband. Construction began immediately, with new broadband now available to consumers in a number of states as a direct result of Phase 1 funding, including Arizona, California, Colorado, Florida, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Oregon, South Carolina, South Dakota, Texas, Virginia, Washington, and West Virginia. Last month, the Commission adopted a second round of Phase 1 funding, making up to $485 million available to leverage private investment and accelerate the availability of broadband in rural America. It provides a second opportunity for carriers to elect funding under the old rules and also expanded eligibility to additional areas lacking broadband. The election for Phase 1 Round 2 funding is coming up in August, with any unused funding flowing into the budget for Connect America Fund Phase 2. Phase 2 of the Connect America Fund will provide funding for 5 years to support voice and broadband-capable networks in areas with no unsubsidized competitor. Funding will be distributed through a combination of a forward-looking voice and broadband cost model and competitive bidding. After adoption of a cost model and funding levels are announced, incumbent price cap carriers will be given the opportunity to make a state-level commitment to provide voice and broadband to the areas they serve. In price cap areas where the incumbent declines the state-level commitment, competitive bidding will be used to distribute support. In April, the Bureau on Delegated Authority adopted a framework for the cost model, which resolved key issues about network design and engineering. To date, the Bureau has announced 7 working versions of the cost model. To have full access to the model, interested parties need only sign a protective order with the Commission. On May 17th, June 17th, and June 25th of this year, we published 3 sets of illustrative model results and related model documentation on the FCC's website to help interested parties better understand potential model outcomes. In addition, the Bureau is using an online virtual workshop to solicit comments and provide a forum for interested parties to weigh in. To date, we have solicited comment from the public on 28 separate topics of discussion since the virtual workshop opened in September 2012. In a Bureau order released last month, the Bureau adopted a process for price cap carriers to elect to make the statewide commitment and presumptions regarding unsubsidized competitors. After the model is adopted, the Bureau will conduct a challenge process for interested parties to contest the eligibility of particular census blocks for funding. Once the list of eligible census blocks is finalized, price cap carriers will have 120 days to file their election to accept or decline the Connect America Phase 2 support. As previously mentioned, in price cap areas where the incumbent declines the state-level commitment, competitive bidding will be used to distribute support. The Bureau recently sought comment on ways to promote broadband deployment in areas served by rate of return carriers. First, whether the Connect America Fund should provide support for standalone broadband services for rate of return carriers. And second, how to best structure a voluntary path for rate of return carriers to participate in the Connect America Phase 2 model-based support. The Bureau also sought comment on a staff report regarding the authorized rate of return. The current rate of return was set in 1990 at 11.25%. FCC staff recently issued a report based on an analysis of 16 publicly traded companies to estimate today's cost of capital. Reasonable estimates were found to lie in a range from 7.39% to 8.72%. The staff report suggests that the Commission consider establishing an authorized rate of return in the upper half of this range, from 8.06% to 8.72%. We are seeking comment on the staff methodology, assumptions, and data, as well as alternative analyses. In the sixth order on reconsideration adopted in April of this year, the Commission directed the Bureau to develop a revised benchmark methodology that will generate a single total loop cost cap for each rate of return study area. We've reached out to stakeholders to have an open and transparent process. We've had productive meetings with various stakeholders on this issue and look forward to further input and engagement in the months ahead. The Bureau fast-tracked 7 waiver requests to update study area boundaries for use in the benchmarks, pending its collection of study area boundaries from all carriers. We've also been working on various waiver requests from rate of return companies. We've acted on 9 requests for waiver of USF reforms, with 2 of those companies currently receiving interim support now, pending a final decision. At this time, 5 petitions for USF waiver remain pending and are actively being worked on by Commission staff. The Bureau is working to develop better data as part of implementing universal service reforms. First, we are collecting study area boundaries, which will allow the Commission to create a complete, publicly accessible nationwide set of study area boundaries. These boundaries are relevant, among other things, in determining appropriate support amounts for rate of return carriers. We are appreciative that many states are filing this information on behalf of the companies within their borders. The carriers filed their information in May, and filings from states are due tomorrow. Staff will work on the reconciliation process for the boundaries data during the summer. In addition, the Bureau on Delegated Authority issued an order in April to survey urban rates for fixed voice and broadband services. A benchmark for urban rates is needed so that carriers in rural areas can certify that their rates are reasonably comparable to the national average urban rates. And we'll be getting the new annual reports from eligible telecommunications carriers, a key component of the Commission's strengthened framework for oversight and accountability. I now turn the presentation over to Margie Weiner for a brief highlight of auction activities, followed by Irene Flannery, who will highlight tribal engagement activities.
As part of the Connect America Fund, the Commission created dedicated universal service support for mobile services, starting with Phase 1 of the Mobility Fund, which is providing one-time funding for the expansion of advanced wireless networks in areas where such networks are lacking. The Commission decided to launch the use of competitive bidding to disperse universal service support in Phase 1 of the Mobility Fund. More specifically, in order to achieve the greatest possible expansion of advanced mobile services with the funds available, the Commission chose to use a reverse auction in which the winning bids were the lowest bids per road mile covered by carriers seeking support. The bidding in the Phase 1 Mobility Fund 1 auction took place last September and winners were announced in October. The winning bids covered 83,000 road miles that previously were beyond the reach of such networks. Since that time, the Commission has received and carefully reviewed the plans of winning bidders regarding the use of the support to meet the requirements of Mobility Fund Phase 1. In recent months, the Commission has authorized the initial disbursements of support to winning bids that won nearly $105 million. In addition, the Commission has announced that it is ready to authorize initial disbursements relating to another $154.5 million in winning bids once the bidders complete the last step of authorization. Recognizing the different and often difficult circumstances on tribal lands, the Commission also set aside up to $50 million to be awarded in Tribal Mobility Fund Phase 1 for one-time support for expanded advanced mobile networks in areas solely on eligible tribal lands. In part, to address concerns that mobile providers sometimes cover roads through tribal lands without reaching tribal populations, the Commission has provided that Tribal Mobility Fund Phase 1 will support coverage on a per-population basis rather than per road mile. To help facilitate self-provision service, the Commission also made special provisions for tribal providers that are seeking support on their own tribal lands. These provisions were applicable to such providers on their lands in the first Mobility Fund Phase 1 auction as well. The Tribal Mobility Fund Phase 1 auction is scheduled for this fall. And now, Irene.
Thank you, Margie. The Commission adopted the Tribal Government Engagement Obligation in recognition of the critical role that tribal engagement and consultation play in the successful deployment of communications services on tribal lands. ETCs are now required to meaningfully engage on an annual basis with the tribal governments on whose lands they serve and for which they receive universal service support. At a minimum, this meaningful engagement must include the topics listed on the slide. ONEP coordinated numerous meetings with industry representatives and associations and tribal governments and intertribal government associations, both before and after adoption of this engagement requirement. This effort is ongoing. The Tribal Government Engagement Obligation holds great promise and represents an opportunity for tribal governments and ETCs to coordinate on many issues critical to the deployment and adoption of communication services on tribal lands.
Thank you, Irene. Looking ahead, we will continue to be busy. Later this summer, we look forward to the Connect America Phase 1 Round 2 elections. Work will continue to finalize the Phase 2 forward-looking cost model. We'll be evaluating the record received in response to various public notices impacting rate of return carriers. We will be busy looking at next steps for the Remote Areas Fund and Phase 2 of the Mobility Fund. And as Margie discussed, later this fall, we will see the Tribal Mobility Fund Phase 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bender. Ms. Weiner, Ms. Flannery, of course, Ms. Milkman and Ms. Maddie. And I guess I have to say Mr. Love. No, seriously, we appreciate that status report. And now if there are any comments from the bench, Commissioner Rosenworcel.
In the interest of time and the daunting complexity of everything you just described, I will say thank you to the Wireline Competition Bureau, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, and the Office of Native Affairs and Policy for your continuous work on the hard slog of high-cost universal service reform, for your dedication to keeping our rural and tribal communities connected, and for your presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Pai?
Likewise, like my colleague, Commissioner Rosenworcel, I want to keep it brief. Obviously, the concept of universal service is pretty simple. The value of universal service has long been established in the law, but the actual administration of universal service principles and rules is exceedingly complex. I think the presentations have illustrated the fact that a lot of painstaking work has gone into the enterprise thus far, and there are going to be a number of areas where even more intensified efforts are going to be required over the next several months and years. And in each of those respects, the past and the future, I'm grateful to your efforts, and we are fortunate to have your stewardship of this effort going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. The sheer volume of work done to modernize USF for the digital age is astounding. Over the past year, the staff has prepared 6 commission-level orders and issued over 32 orders. You've awarded funding for Phase 1 of both the Connect America Fund and the Mobility Fund. You've released over 35 public notices, including one addressing the Tribal Government Engagement Obligation. In addition, you've created a virtual workshop, as you mentioned, where over 25 topics related to the Phase 2 cost model that's being discussed. This all will help broadband, both wired and wireless, help get broadband to those high-cost areas throughout this nation. I thank you, America thanks you, and we just are extremely appreciative of all of your hard work. So thank you very much for the presentation. Madam Secretary.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, for your final presentation today, the Incentive Auction Task Force will present an update on progress towards the television broadcast incentive auction. Bless you.
Good morning, Ms.
Madam
Epson.
Chairwoman.
How are you?
I'm fine, I
Okay.
think. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. I'm pleased to be here today to present an update on our progress on the broadcast television incentive auction. This is the first open meeting update, and we expect to provide further updates at future meetings. Because today is the first update, we will look briefly back at some of the work we've done. As you know, the Incentive Auction Task Force is made up of staff from across the Commission. Here at the table today, with me today, are Julie Knapp, Chief of the Office of Engineering and Technology, Ruth Milkman, Chief of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Mindell De La Torre, Chief of the International Bureau, and Rebecca Hansen, Senior Advisor representing the Media Bureau. Of course, Sean Lev, General Counsel, is also part of our group, and each of these offices and bureaus has played and will play an integral part in the FCC's implementation of the broadcast incentive auction. The incentive auction proceeding has been guided by four primary public interest objectives. First, relieving the spectrum crunch by creating a market-based process for repurposing the maximum amount of UHF spectrum for licensed and unlicensed flexible use. As the chart demonstrates, U.S. mobile data usage is expected to grow by a factor of 9 by 2017. Second, providing a unique financial opportunity for participating broadcasters while preserving a healthy broadcast service for those who do not contribute their spectrum. Third, advancing congressional objectives that include reimbursing repack broadcasters, funding FirstNet, and deficit reduction. And fourth, promoting innovation and a vibrant mobile market. In designing the auction, the Commission seeks to advance these multiple public interest goals. The Commission proposed the incentive auction concept in its 2010 National Broadband Plan as a market-based voluntary means of repurposing spectrum. As Congress considered the proposal and drafted the Spectrum Act legislation in 2011, the Commission began thinking about how such an auction could be implemented. Here you see our progress through 2012. A guiding principle has been done is to get it done on time, but to get it done right. The incentive auction team has accomplished a lot in a relatively short amount of time. In the first 6 months after the Act was passed, we quickly formed a task force, announced retention of auction design experts, adopted a channel sharing order, and of course officially launched the proceeding by adopting a detailed and comprehensive notice of proposed rulemaking on September 28, 2012. Public engagement and conducting an open, transparent, and participatory process are of the utmost importance. To that end, the commissioners and staff have participated in over 150 incentive auction-related events and meetings since the enactment of the Spectrum Act. Through the LEARN program, we've placed a special emphasis on broadcaster outreach. We've created a web page featuring educational tools for those wanting to learn about the auction. In 2012 and so far in 2013, we've hosted several workshops and participated in numerous industry conferences, both to inform the public about the proceeding and solicit input on distinct incentive auction issues. Some of the most significant events included workshops on channel sharing, reimbursement for relocation costs, auction design, the band plan, and of course the NPRM itself. Since the NPRM was issued, we've made significant progress in key areas of our work: forward and reverse auction design, the repacking process, the 600 megahertz band plan, international coordination with Canada and Mexico, and the post-auction broadcaster relocation issues. One area of focus has been developing our repacking methodology. We released a public notice on the new TV study software that calculates TV station coverage and analyzes interference using the methodology of OET69. The software provides various options for handling the data that goes into the calculations, such as population statistics, terrain data, and technical information on TV broadcast transmission facilities. The public notice proposed and invited comment on ways to address these various data elements so that we provide a realistic modeling consistent with Congress's mandate to make all reasonable efforts to preserve each broadcast station's coverage and population served. We are evaluating the comments that we have received on the TV study software and continue to work with stakeholders on crafting the best approach. We've also made progress on designing a forward auction band plan that will facilitate a successful auction. In the NPRM, the Commission sought comment on the band plan design and emphasized the importance of balancing flexibility with certainty while maximizing the amount of spectrum we can make available for wireless broadband services in each geographic area. The NPRM also included several band proposals and requested additional proposals for consideration. We held a workshop to advance ours and the public's understanding of certain technical issues. While the workshop did shed light on many of the technical issues under consideration, it also demonstrated the need to build a more robust record with respect to how the band plan approaches what could best be defined as the potential for market variation. In this illustration, you can see that in certain constrained markets, we may not be able to repurpose as much spectrum as in the majority of major markets. To increase the chances of a successful auction, it would be helpful to have a band plan that will allow us to maximize the nationwide amount without being limited by the amount of spectrum in constrained markets. It's also important to note that while in some rural markets it would be possible to repurpose more spectrum than in major markets, we do not intend to recommend repurposing spectrum at those levels. As we do today, we also must ensure that broadcast stations and wireless operations using the same frequencies in different geographic markets does not result in harmful interference to either broadcast or wireless operations. In order to build the record with respect to band plan solutions that accommodate this market variation, we drafted the band plan public notice that was released on May 17th. We have received initial comments and expect additional comments tomorrow. With an open ear to industry input, we continue to work towards developing a band plan to recommend to the Commission that serves the public interest. Also, thanks to our experience with the DTV transition, we recognize that the post-auction transition of broadcasters to new channels will be complex. We also recognize that the transition will need to be carried out as expeditiously as possible while avoiding unnecessary disruption. The Spectrum Act authorizes us to use up to $1.75 billion of auction proceeds to reimburse eligible broadcasters and MVPDs for the costs associated with modifying their facilities. In order to best understand the potential costs, challenges, and timing of this transition, the Commission has retained the spectrum engineering firm Widelity, Inc. to conduct a preliminary review of equipment replacement costs, equipment availability, and other logistical challenges. The Commission is also leveraging its internal data on broadcaster equipment, evaluating a range of policy approaches, and considering the tax implications that different reimbursement approaches may have for broadcasters. Next steps. We're poised to take several major steps in the coming weeks. Fulfilling our commitments to transparency and providing ample opportunity for public input, in the next several weeks, we will release a set of repacking-related resources. They will include, 1, an update to the TV study software, 2, making information about U.S. stations and Canadian and Mexican allotments from FCC databases easier to access. And 3, sample data files that may be used to determine the scope of possible channel assignments for each U.S. TV station and the co- and adjacent channel constraints for each station. These resources will not by themselves determine how the Commission will select bids or make definitive channel assignments, but they provide important information about the repacking piece of the incentive auction. Importantly, these resources do not reflect a final Commission decision, but continue the dialogue in establishing repacking parameters. We expect to release other additional elements of the repacking process in the months ahead. On the international front, the task force will continue its staff-level meetings with Canadian and Mexican regulators. Importantly, Chairwoman Clyburn has contacted and met with her Canadian counterparts and expects to continue coordination at this level over the coming months, including in-person meetings in July with senior Canadian officials in Ottawa and with Mexican officials at the International Telecommunications Union Global Symposium for Regulators. Also, we expect to increase our level of consultation with U.S. industry. Finally, it is obvious but worth stating again and again that broadcaster participation is critical to the success of the incentive auction. Our prime directive is to design an auction that facilitates broadcaster participation, including for stations who want to continue to broadcast. Thus, recognizing the importance of the channel sharing option for broadcasters, we're interested in authorizing one or more channel sharing pilots. We believe such pilots can demonstrate the technical and legal arrangements necessary to implement a successful channel sharing arrangement. They may also help us identify any legal and practical impediments to promoting and operating such a shared facility. We encourage broadcasters to consider participating in such channel sharing pilots and to bring proposals to the Media Bureau for consideration. Finally, the task force is working steadily to provide options for the Commission in the design of the auction and development of auction rules. We're continuing to work towards providing a record to allow the Commission to meet the goals of a 2013 report and order and a 2014 broadcast incentive auction. Thank you, Chairwoman Clyburn and Commissioners Rosenworcel and Pai, for the opportunity to update you on the task force work. We look forward to updating you again at future Commission meetings.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Rosenworcel?
So I guess the net here is you've been busy. And as your presentation makes clear, we are in the early stages of the complex but critical task of conducting wireless incentive auctions. The road ahead is arduous, the choice is hard and important. But the task is also historic. We have an opportunity to lead the world in demonstrating novel ways to reclaim spectrum and repurpose old airwaves for new mobile broadband use. That is epic and exciting. In taking on things this monumental, it is always better to have a full complement of commissioners. But I believe we have a mandate from Congress and cannot delay. We need to make progress. We need to move forward. Forward momentum requires that we both engage stakeholders externally and use our resources well internally. In all of our efforts, we need to keep in mind the power of simplicity in the rules we develop, the need for fairness in treatment of our stakeholders, the balance required in decision-making, and the essential task of funding public safety. Now, from the lofty to the local, I think it is important to focus on several near-term activities to keep our efforts on course. First, forward progress requires transparency. I continue to believe the Commission should hold a series of public hearings on the incentive auctions. We can use these sessions to explore major aspects of the auction, the reverse auction, the repacking, the forward auction, and the transition process. We could ask the hard questions. What's the right balance of licensed and unlicensed spectrum under the law? How do the forward and reverse auctions fit together? How will we determine initial bids? Commissioners could attend, engage directly with experts, and provide stakeholders with an opportunity to connect directly with decision makers. Second, forward progress requires that our outreach to broadcasters is not just broad, but also targeted. To this end, I think the task force should directly reach out to every broadcaster in the top 30 markets in this country. That is where our mobile broadband needs are greatest. Third, forward progress requires that we make progress on the band plan. All good deliberations must come to an end. We should strive to have a 600 megahertz band plan in place by the end of the third quarter this year. Fourth, and finally, forward progress means we should assess what aspects of the auctions are not really in dispute. So I'll ask the task force to consider if we should collect these issues, tee up an order, and take them off the table. In closing, let me thank you all and all the people who work with you, because I know you're striving hard to make these auctions a success. And thank you also to the chairwoman for instituting these monthly updates and for asking the team to update us today.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Unlike universal service, our authority over incentive auction is of relatively recent vintage, but I think it's pretty clear from Gary's presentation that the issues are nonetheless as complex as universal service obligations are. I've obviously said a lot in the past about incentive auctions, so I won't repeat it here, but I simply want to say thank you. I think the fact that all of you are here representing 3 bureaus, 1 office, and the task force speaks to the fact that this is a multidisciplinary effort, and we are very grateful, all of us, I think, to have your deep engagement on these issues. I certainly look forward to working with you in the time to come, and want to express my willingness to work with you and my colleagues, of course, if there's anything we can do to help in this enterprise. So thank you very much.
Mr. Epstein, Ms. Hanson, Mr. Knapp, Ms. Delatorre, and Ms. Milkman. My sincere thanks to you and your staff for the hard work that went into today's update. I am pleased that the Commission's world-class incentive auction team of economists, auction experts, and engineers are making steady progress towards holding the world's first incentive auction in 2014, which will free up significant spectrum for mobile broadband use. The incentive auction is a top institutional priority, and I will continue to stay involved at every step. Staff will keep this proceeding on track because our goals are to help to deliver faster speeds, greater capacity, and ubiquitous wireless connectivity to consumers and businesses across this nation. The path to success with this auction includes a balanced approach which you laid out, which frees up spectrum for licensed and unlicensed uses, promotes competition, and enables efficient, innovative, and productive use of one of the nation's most valuable spectrum bands while preserving a healthy broadcast industry. We also all know that a successful incentive auction is key to funding a nationwide network for emergency responders. We call it FirstNet. I continue to encourage all stakeholders to engage constructively in this important proceeding. And as we heard Gary state time and time again, progress is being made on many fronts. And the staff will continue to engage all parties on the important issues like the 600 megahertz band plan and coordination with Canada and Mexico. Today's presentation is the first of a series of periodic updates that I've asked the team to provide. I thank you very much, and I look forward to the next installment. At this time, I will ask my colleagues if they have any announcements.
Sure. I have 3 brief announcements I want to make this morning. First, I want to introduce our legal intern for the summer, Brenda Villanueva. Brenda's an FCBA Foundation Summer Intern Scholar, and we are very proud of her. She comes to us from the University of Maryland Law School, where she serves as the Policy Initiative Director for the National Latina Law Student Association. Brenda's also been a policy fellow at the National Hispanic Media Coalition and a legislative assistant for Congressman Joe Baca. Not too shabby. We're also happy to introduce our engineering intern, Mahir Srivastava. Mahir is a Rodman Scholar at the University of Virginia School of Engineering and Applied Science. And in addition to engineering, he's studying economics and is participant in the University of Virginia's Technology Leaders Program. So watch out. We got a lawyer and an engineer. Finally, we have a happy announcement from our office. Our staff assistant, Marquita Boozer, recently announced the birth of her son, Mason Eli. And though we're missing having her even keel and joyful ways in our office right now, we are excited to report that both Marquita and her son Mason are doing very well.
Congratulations. Yes. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pye?
I just want to take a minute to introduce our two law clerks for the summer, Brian Cleveland and Ian Moore. We'll start with Brian. Brian grew up in Upland, California, and earned his undergraduate degree in political science from Biola University, where he also completed the classics program through the Torrey Honors Institute. I'm sure that ancient Greek will have great practical application in your future. During college, he worked for his local Parks and Recs office, but he somehow never managed to see the show Parks and Recreation, which we continue to hold against him. In between undergrad and law school, he did press and legislative work for Congressman Wally Herger. This fall, he will enter his second year at Harvard Law School, where he is an editor of the Harvard Journal of Law and Technology. After learning that he completed a triathlon 2 summers ago and climbed a couple of mountains taller than 14,000 feet last summer, we are confident that he has the endurance to sit in our office doing comment summaries. Next, we have Ian Moore. Ian grew up in Peachtree City, Georgia. For those of you who don't know, I didn't. Peachtree City is known for its miles of golf cart paths. Everyone owns a golf cart there, virtually from birth, which is how Ian was able to drive to school a few years before he was able to legally drive a car. After leaving Peachtree City, he graduated from Georgia Tech with a degree in aerospace engineering. He literally is a rocket scientist. In college, he spent a few semesters in California working on a DARPA project in a giant transonic wind tunnel, which is coincidentally when he started to lose his hearing. He also got to work extensively with laser optic equipment despite having no formal training, or even informal training for that matter, with lasers, which is coincidentally when he started to lose his eyesight. To hear him tell it, dodging OSHA inspectors was his first real experience with federal agencies. This fall, Ian will start his second year at New York University Law School. We are pleased to have him, as well as Brian, and grateful to have Josh Cox, our intern from the previous semester, here. He came back for more, and we'll keep giving it to him. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you, and I'd like to join my colleagues in introducing my 3 law clerks for the summer. Keenan Adamczyk, who's a third year at George Washington U. He received his undergraduate at the College of William and Mary, and he double majored in history and government. He enjoys skiing and golfing and hopes to pursue a career in communications law after graduation. Welcome. Julie Thompson is a second year at the University of Texas, where she is on staff for the Texas International Law Journal and is a law school representative in student government. She received her undergraduate degree at, guess where, the University of Texas at Austin, with a double major in government and journalism. She loves to travel and is a half marathon runner. I had to pretend to like her, but anyway, no. I've done 2 unsuccessfully. And John Ballou, who just finished his first year at Washington and Lee University, was accepted this week to transfer to the University of Virginia. He received his undergraduate degree from the University of Virginia, where he double majored in government and religious studies. He enjoys playing basketball and tennis and supporting UVA's sport team. Thank you and welcome. And I would be remiss if I did not ask for a cue up. There are several other people to thank, and I did not have, we don't have the time for me to go through, but these persons and more have been critical to our office and the support of the office and the commission, and I want to thank all of them for their hard work and their commitment to this agency. And I want to say have special recognition and thank you to my chief of staff, Michelle Ellison, who is a history maker also at this agency, so much so that I think she might have left the room, maybe she was afraid, Michelle has been at this agency at least 18 years and is an incredible talent and a very loyal FCC individual. And it was on purpose, so thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. And though I can't say this out loud, one member that I can still consider a member of the team who is in the audience is Angie Cronenberg. Thank you so much for coming to this first meeting. You had such an incredible role in this, and I just want to thank you and recognize you for your hard work, and congratulations to you on your new role. We really do miss you, but I know you will continue to do a great job for this nation. And if my colleagues do not have any further announcements, Madam Secretary, please announce the date of the next FCC agenda meeting.
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Friday, July 19th, 2013.
And so then we stand adjourned.
Okay, are we ready for the chairwoman's availability? If I could just remind you, it's the usual rules. We'll go along the table. Everyone gets one question. If you could just introduce yourself and state your media outlet when you ask your question, please. And we'll start with Paul.
Okay.
Ms. Chairwoman, I wanted to ask a question before everyone else asks it. Is there anything additional? Last week you said you told me on the SoftBank order, you said it will be released in a timely fashion. Is there anything where you can give us on time, since all the business considerations apparently have been cleared up, when you would hope to circulate something like that?
Staff is still working hard on that item, and we expect, again, in a timely fashion to issue an order. But staff is still hard at work on that particular item.
Okay. My question is on the incentive auction. There's been a lot of talk lately about how far ahead things can move under your acting chairmanship in terms of getting ready for the auction. But my question is that Commissioner Rosenworcel has made some very concrete suggestions, including teeing everything up in an NPRM that's not controversial and having a bunch of additional workshops so that there's more transparency. Are you looking at those things? I mean, how far do you see things moving under your watch?
As was affirmed in the presentation, we've had well over 100 engagements. One of the things that is a challenge, especially going on the road, which is something I would like to do, is sequestration. So we're budgetarily constrained. We're taking a lot of significant, measures to cut costs at this time. So any type of creative engagement, we might have to do things more electronically than we would like, but we remain open to engagement. This is a very significant item in terms of our nation's communications future, and any opportunity for robust interaction, we will encourage and work with my colleagues to do so.
Phil Goldstein from Fierce Wireless. We don't have any of the technical rules in front of us, but regarding the H block, can you provide us some insight as to what in that order is going to be there that's going to specifically promote a competitive bidding process? Because there are obviously some companies that have expressed interest in that spectrum, but there are potentially many more out there that haven't yet. So can you give us some insight into how that competitive bidding process is going to be fostered?
Well, again, we just announced a pathway today. The team, after this press conference, if you want a bit more specificity, will do that. As you know, we have not announced a date certain, but we are working towards the particular. This is but a first step that we affirmed today as it relates to this auction. Again, in terms of the specificity in which you mentioned, the team will fulfill you in a few minutes.
Hi, Chairwoman. Paul Barbagallo from Bloomberg BNA. At this point, Chairwoman, do you have intentions to circulate an order on interoperability in the lower 700 megahertz band?
Interoperability remains a very important issue for me. I am from a rural state, and I am desirous of full, robust engagement and opportunities and options all across this nation. That is important to me. This is an item, this is an issue that I still hold hope that there will be an industry consensus, an industry solution. But if that does not happen, I am urging that to happen. But if that does not happen relatively quickly, I will be poised to listen to whatever recommendations staff would have. That remains very important to me.
Hi, Alina Solik with Reuters. My questions have been asked, but I thought I'd stick it out and clarify. On the Sprint SoftBank deal, when you say staff, you mean it's still in the bureaus, they're still working out the details of what? That
is what I mean. You know, if you remember, it was after the 180-day self-imposed mark that we have for ourselves, aspirational mark that we have for ourselves for reviewing transactions, that we got information from some of the outside, our agency counterparts. So we have to, at that point, of course, integrate all of that into our consideration. So we are moving in an expeditious manner. We never stopped working. We stayed laser focused on this item. It has been dynamic in the marketplace and with many of you in your reportings, but we had 2 applications before us, and we continue and are continuing to work on those.
Hi, I'm Matthew Schwartz with the Communications Daily. First of all, congratulations,
Thank you.
Chairwoman. I have a question about inmate calling service reform. As the Wireline Bureau works to reform the rates, what are the hardest decisions you find that have to be made? What are the biggest sticking points, and has the Commission kind of settled on what the highest rate should be?
In order to try to strike a balance between the necessary security issues, what is a fair and reasonable rate for the providers, and what's an affordable regime for the families. All of those considerations and more go into the considerations, and it is simple to say, but it's very complex to execute. But what we will be properly reinforced with on July 10th is an exchange, a workshop that will bring these and so many more issues, to the table. Looking at how other states, there are 8 states and some other areas in the country that have a framework that's affordable to, those users, and still offers a reasonable rate of return and the proper security protocols. It is working in other places, and I am hopeful that July 10th engagement will help us along the way to see what is working in key parts of this country to bring ubiquitous affordability for those families.
Hi, I'm Mike Ravino with the Civic Affairs TV Network. Congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
The operations side of our business, as we're developing our new national network, came to me and said they're talking to all kinds of low-power stations across the country to get our content to them, and we're finding that the unsettled marketplace, ever since the Spectrum Act was passed, has really affected a lot of the low-power operations, and they don't see a clear way forward. We know that this information will be clarified in the when the NPRM is finalized. One thing has emerged that we'd like you to comment on, and that is there seems to be some real gaps in how the legislation was written, and the 6,400 translators and low power, 74% of all TV licenses, are going to have almost $1 billion unfunded mandate on their hands to make the move. And what's the process you envision for congressional remedies to some of these issues that you all will uncover in this process?
Well, one of the things, several things that I am mindful and the agency is mindful. in terms of the significance and the benefits and what the translator community and the low-power television community, what they mean to key places in this nation. And so while you did reaffirm what is or is not in the law, what we will be mindful of in our decision-making is how the current ecosystem, how it is currently, what our directives are in terms of diversity in programming, diversity in ownership, diversity in offerings, and how all of that, those key objectives in terms of a competitive landscape, how we craft policies in order to take all of that into consideration and do what we believe is in the spirit of the act, but even more so that addresses the needs of the American public. So all of these things will be taken in consideration. We will, of course, follow the law, but we will also use the tools at our disposal to ensure that the current landscape is as unharmed or as unimpacted in terms of the delivery of critical information to the public. Thank you very much. See you next month.
Now we'll have the Bureau press conference. I think we'll just do them in order of the agenda. So if the wireline wireless team could come up on 477. Who has a question?
On all of them?
477.
This is 477, yeah. Okay. No? Okay. I thought we did. So, class dismissed. Number 2 would be wireless, H-Block.
I have a question on H-Block.
So, if we could have the wireless team come up.
Especially, but I will.
He asked a question about.
Okay. I'll ask the first question. So this is 2 paired 5 megahertz blocks, and I just wanted to ask. It seems like a lot of the focus lately has been on bigger spectrum blocks, and that's what everybody's talking about. I'm just. Do you have any sense of how much commercial interest there's going to be in 2 5 megahertz blocks, just given sort of the movement toward these larger blocks?
One of the reasons that there's interest in this particular block is that it can be aggregated with other blocks in the PCS spectrum, whether or not they are immediately adjacent. And all 4 of the national carriers, as well as many other smaller players, have PCS spectrum already.
Okay.
Phil Goldstein from Fierce Wireless. I think the original goal was to have the H-Block auction sometime by the end of 2013. Now it seems like it could be early 2014. What are some of the factors that you guys are going to have to be dealing with and working through in terms of setting an auction date?
Well, normally we try to allow enough time between the order and the auction to run a process to decide the auction design and to set rules for things like what's the reserve price, what are the activity rules, etc. We also need to give bidders enough time to prepare for the auction. We generally do a mock auction. And then there are always the timing considerations of you don't start an auction on December 24th, for example. So those are anything else? That's about it.
Isn't it usually like 6 months? Isn't there usually like at least 6 months leeway between?
6 months is sort of the rough time frame.
Hi, Paul Barbagallo with Bloomberg BNA. I was hoping you might be able to elaborate on the service rules, particularly with respect to avoiding harmful interference.
I think we won't. The item will be out today or tomorrow at the latest, and then you'll be able to see the technical rules in all their glory.
Can you comment at all on build-out requirements?
No, but it's I think.
Is it the 75%?
Yeah, it's 75%. There's a 10-year end of term 75% requirement that speaks to you build out the area. If you don't build out the area, the license gets returned. There's a 4-year 40% interim requirement, and then it's similar to the 700 megahertz band. The license term gets shortened if you miss the interim.
So 4 years, 40, 75, 10 years.
That's correct. And the penalty for missing the interim is shortening of the license of the term from 10 to 8 years.
Gotcha.
Okay, is that it?
And the item will be out maybe today?
That's the go.
All right, CP&I. Other questions on the CP&I item? Yep. Okay, we have one question.
Okay. I didn't want you to feel like this was an unimportant item or something we didn't care about, so I did have a question for you. Something that's I've written about this item quite a few times, and the thing that I'm still not clear on is there some data that carriers collect that will not be subject to the CP&I? I mean, I don't understand I know it's not third part, but I mean, is there some data that the carriers might collect that won't be subject to the rule?
Well, there's a specific statutory definition of CP&I, and it includes certain things. So those are the things that are covered. Things that are not within the statutory definition, we don't cover. So the things that are covered are what was mentioned today. So such things as calls, the numbers received, where you received a call from, the numbers you called, where you were when you made a call on a mobile phone, the length of a call, whether a call was dropped. Those are things that may that would likely be covered, that are covered. Other things, in particular things not relating to calls that may be on a smartphone, would not be covered. So,
I mean, can you give me any examples of the kinds of things that wouldn't be covered?
Well, things that relate to an information service as opposed to a telecommunication service are not covered by today's item, right? So a website visited would be information that might be collected. I don't know if, but it's not part of making a phone call. This is about telecommunications carriers and telecommunication services making phone calls.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
I guess we have one more from Paul.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So about the reasonable precaution standard, will that be the same historically as just the traditional telephone companies and then later the VoIP providers?
Change the standard. This is a declaratory ruling. It's not intended to change the law. We have not sought to change the standard enunciated in prior commission decisions.
So wireless carriers would have to take the same precautions
the standard is the same.
The standard is the same.
Right. So what may be reasonable will depend on facts and circumstances, but the legal standard is not changed.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any questions on the USF presentation, Connect America, the wireline presentation? Going once, going twice. Okay, and then incentive auction is the final presentation. And there is I
didn't know you were going to offer us that one, so.
It's offered.
Yeah, I did have
a question.
I do have a logistical question or two. I'm sorry.
Hi, Howard.
Hey, Gary. You said something about how there was going to be that there were international meetings being held on some of but then you mentioned something about an international regulatory conference. So does that mean that Chairwoman Clyburn is going to be actually going to this conference? I just wanted to know if you can give me a little bit more on the logistics of the international stuff.
There are two things that are being held, and one thing that are technical level staff meetings, and they've been held for several months, and they continue to be held. We had one as recently as this week. Chairwoman Clyburn in July is going to Ottawa to meet with Canadian officials. One of the major topics on the agenda is the incentive auction. And second, and Mindell's here, yep. okay, is the meeting place where she's going to be meeting with the Mexicans, the regulator session?
The acting chairwoman will be participating in the Global Symposium for Regulators. It's an ITU event. Brings regulators from all over the world in Warsaw, and we have scheduled side meetings with the Mexicans, so our counterparts from COFITEL.
When is that meeting?
That's next week.
Oh, next week. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I asked because I thought that's the first time I'd heard that. Thank you. That's it.
Oh, and just a quick question in regard to Commissioner Rosenworcel's statement about public hearings. Yep. So I'm wondering if those are in the works and what they might entail going forward.
I think Chairwoman Clyburn talked about that, given our resources and everything else. The answer is yes, we're going to be doing outreach. The exact form is to be determined. The subjects matter that Commissioner Rosenworcel were talking about surely are in our mind. The exact form of the engagement, we're being creative. Okay, we're doing workshops, we're doing public notices, and I'm sure we can craft something where we can get the appropriate input.
Are there any workshops actually scheduled at this point?
There are a couple in the planning stage, which we'll announce pretty soon. Okay. But they are. We have reserved rooms.
Is that it? Thank you very much.
No, Mike Ravino, Civic Affairs TV Network. In the Spectrum Act, there's a single line that talks about the rights of low powers in the auction remain.
Correct.
What they are today.
As we discussed yesterday.
Yes. Well, my other hat, I had my lobbying hat on yesterday. But there's a key question here that a lot of the people I'm reporting to want to know. Do you anticipate that the administrative rules we have today for filing applications, if you want to move your frequency, move your channel, do we anticipate that those same administrative rules will apply in the repack for low power, or do you anticipate having to write a whole new set of administrative rules?
So here's where Rebecca will correct me, but I'll try.
Okay.
And that is that the question of treatment is one of the things that is teed up in the NPRM, and we've asked questions about process and issues thereafter. As to specific filing requirements, I'm not sure.
Right.
They're addressed in the draft report order.
Okay.
Right. So from what you determine from those comments, and then you'll propose rules, and those will be the new administrative rules for how to act in the repack?
Correct.
Right. So we can't say that today's rules for filing on top of someone will stay or could go.
That depends on how the commission votes what we propose.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.